There is a part of you that needs to die, not with pain, but with lucidity. An old, repetitive fragment that makes you act as if you are awake, when in fact, you are just repeating what you were taught to be. What if I told you that this version of you that you call me is just an echo? A conditioned reflex shaped by memories, fears, and expectations that you don't even realize you carry? This video is not about improving who you are. It is about disintegrating what was never you. And this process is not comfortable. It is like peeling off the skin of a character that you have worn for your entire life. But on the other side, there is something more real, something that watches you from behind your eyes, something that has never been touched by time, nor by the lies that you believe to be your truth. Brace yourself, because nothing that will be said here can be heard with the ears of the old mind. This is a journey where old thoughts will dissolve, masks will fall, and internal structures will be broken. The ego does not like this path because it cannot survive here. But consciousness, it flourishes. If you feel ready to step through this mirror and look into the eyes of your true self, go ahead, because what is about to be revealed cannot be forgotten, and once seen, it cannot be undone. Long before modern psychology attempted to decipher the workings of the mind, there was an occult science, veiled in temples, whispered by initiates, and protected by the veils of symbolism. The ancients knew, human beings are not born free. They are born in bondage, not to physical chains, but to imposed ideas, patterns, and identities. In Egypt, the priests of Thoth led aspirants through symbolic death before receiving any spiritual truth. Die before you die, they said, and you will discover that there is no death. This idea of the destruction of the false self in order to rebirth the essence runs through all esoteric traditions. In Hermeticism, they spoke of the dissolution of the inner lead, the lower, dense self identified with matter and fear, so that the gold of the spirit could emerge. In the mysteries of Eleusis, the Greeks underwent secret rituals that made them confront their own emptiness, the terror of not knowing who they were, only to find, on the other side, a new identity. Not constructed, but revealed. In the Hindu tradition, this process is known as neti neti. I am neither this nor that. A patient and radical deconstruction of all labels. Am I my name? No. My profession? No. My desires, my memories? No. And then, when all that is illusory falls away, what remains? The true self. Silent, unchanging, eternal. Centuries later, Carl Jung would echo this same truth. He called this process individuation, the journey of becoming that which you already are in essence, but have forgotten. For Jung, the I that operates in everyday life is merely the persona, a socially accepted mask. But behind it lives the self, the archetypal center of the psyche, the image of wholeness, the spark of the divine within the human. Finding it is not a linear process, but rather an initiatory one. And like all initiation, it requires going through the dark night of the soul, where everything that is false must be burned in the fire of consciousness. Thus, in all eras, cultures, and symbols, the teaching is the same. The old self must die so that the true self can be born. Not with violence, but with courage. Not with force, but with surrender. Because only when we stop clinging to what we think we are, do we make room for what we have always been, and which waits silently to emerge. Imagine that you were born in a theater, where from the first breath you took, you were given a role, a costume, and a script. They told you who you were, what you should want, what you should be afraid of, and without realizing it, you learned to interpret this play masterfully. But inside you, silently, something always knew that there was a bigger stage, a deeper reality. And this is where the true psychology of the destruction of the old self begins, not as a denial of identity, but as a return to truth. Jung said that what you need most will be found where you least want to look, and that place is inside you. There live the shadows, repressed fragments, unhealed wounds, condemned desires, and silenced truths. The old self, the one you think is you, was shaped to keep all of this locked away. It is a defense system, a survival mechanism that arose to protect you, but that now imprisons you. This old self is formed by layers of conditioning, trauma, social expectations, and most importantly, fear. Fear of not being accepted, fear of failure, fear of being forgotten. And so you build an entire life on this wounded self, like a house, built on quicksand. On the outside, stability. On the inside, emptiness. The destruction of the old self, then, is not an attack. It is a release, a subtle process of disidentification. You do not need to kill your ego. You need to illuminate its roots. We need to stop fighting the old self as if it were an enemy. It is, in fact, a part of you that needs to be embraced and transcended. True transformation happens when you stop resisting and start observing. When you realize that your thoughts are not you, that your emotions do not define who you are. They are just clouds, and you are the sky. By observing, you unravel the knots. By bringing light to what was unconscious, you begin to dissolve the old pattern. And something magical happens. The space that was occupied by the old begins to be filled with something new. A new presence, a new silence, a new strength that does not shout, but sustains. This is the beginning of reconstruction. But this process, although powerful, is not without pain. Because everything you have built as your identity will resist. The old self will try to survive, disguised as reason, guilt, or doubt. And that is why the next step is so important. To go even deeper and understand the hidden mechanisms that keep the old self alive. When the old self feels threatened, it manifests itself with force. Suddenly, you find yourself procrastinating, sabotaging your choices, justifying old behaviors with phrases that seem logical, but are just masks of fear. That's just the way I am. I can't change. Maybe it's not the right time. These voices don't come from your essence. They come from the programming you are about to transcend. The mind, when conditioned for a long time, creates shortcuts, mental paths that repeat themselves like invisible tracks. And you, without realizing it, live inside an emotional train that passes through the same places, encounters the same conflicts, repeats the same cycles. This is called a pattern. And what keeps these patterns alive? Identification. You believe you need them to exist, like a puppet that believes the strings are part of its body. But the true awakening happens when you realize that you can let go of the strings. When, even trembling, you dare to do something that the old self would never allow. This is the rupture. It is at this point that many people retreat, because they feel an emptiness, as if they have lost themselves. But this emptiness is not absence, it is space. It is the womb of the new being that is about to be born. Jung called this the process of individuation, the journey in which the individual ceases to be just a reflection of the collective to become whole, uniting light and shadow, reason and instinct, ego and soul. And this process requires courage, because you will have to enter the dark forest of the psyche, where no map works, only intuition. But there is something beautiful in this. Each step towards self-knowledge dissolves an invisible shackle. Each choice made consciously opens a new path within you, and little by little that old self, limited, fearful, reactive, begins to melt away like mist at dawn. In its place emerges a being who is more present, lighter, more whole. Not because you have learned something new, but because you have remembered what you have always been. It is at this point that you begin to understand that destroying the old self is not a loss. It is a return to the essence, to freedom, to the original state where the soul breathes without fear. And now that this vision is revealed, an essential question remains: how to bring this transformation to the realm of reality? How to live every day as this new version that awakens within you? Transformation doesn't happen in a single epiphany, but in the quiet cultivation of daily decisions. If destroying the old self is the sacred fire, then living as the new self is keeping that flame burning day after day. And to do that, you too need to create rituals, not as external obligations, but as internal anchors that keep you aligned with your truth. The first key is radical presence, when you become the observer of your own thoughts, rather than being swept away by them. A.E. New space opens up. This space is where the new you breathes. So start your day with a moment of intentional silence. Sit down, breathe deeply, and ask, who am I without the masks? Don't expect an immediate answer. Just listen. Wisdom reveals itself in the void. The second practice is conscious disidentification. When an old habit arises, whether it's an emotional reaction, an automatic judgment, or an impulsive behavior, stop for a second and say to yourself, this is not who I am, it's who I was. Name the old you. Give it a face, a voice, personality, and then choose differently. The act of consciously choosing, even if it's small, is already a ritual of rebirth. The third technique is vibrational mirroring. Everything you consume, think, feel, and allow into your emotional field is shaping the frequency you emit. And this frequency, in turn, attracts the experiences you live. So, feed yourself with content that uplifts, surround yourself with people who inspire, choose words that bring light. This is not toxic positivity, it's vibrational engineering. And when the days are difficult, and they are, remember, resistance is part of the process. The old you will try to survive. It will call, scream, seduce with the comfort of the familiar. But you have already seen beyond. You have already tasted what it is to be whole. So even when you fall, get up with more awareness, because each fall can be a lesson or a prison. It's up to you. These practices don't require perfection, they require presence. And in time you will realize the new you does not suddenly appear. It is revealed layer by layer, choice by choice, silence by silence, until one day you look back and the old you is no longer there. You did not come here by chance. Something inside you was already in the process of breaking, yearning for a new way of existing. The old self, built on fears, external expectations, and unconscious repetitions, cannot cross the portal of true transformation. It needs to be left behind with gratitude, yes, but with firmness, because there is no room for rebirth without detachment. Throughout this journey, we have delved into the idea that your self is not fixed, but fluid. That altered states of consciousness, daily rituals, and deep self-observation are ancient tools for rebuilding the being, not only mentally, but energetically, spiritually, vibrationally. You have learned that the unconscious is not a dark prison, but a temple that can be illuminated, that the destruction of the old is not the end, but the sacred beginning of a new cycle. And now the question is no longer, who have you been, but who are you willing to become? Remember, the universe does not reward knowledge. It responds to the vibration you choose to sustain. And this choice is always in the now. If this message touched something within you, share it. Leave a comment. The old no longer serves me. Writing it is declaring, sealing, assuming, because the new you is already here, waiting to be lived.